Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another review. Today I'm reviewing the film that Wes Craven released in 1991, the horror comedy The People Under the Stairs. It stars Brandon Adams, Everett McGill, Wendy Robbie, AJ Langer, Ving Rhames, and Sean Wallen, among others. The film has a 6.3 on IMDb, a 58% with the audience on Rotten Tomatoes, and a 59 with the critics. And as one critic is noted to have said, that this is the work of what this is the work of the Wes Craven we came to admire. Meaning, this is, I guess you could say, it's their way of saying this is standard fare for Wes Craven, or at least the type of films that Wes Craven directs that we come to really enjoy. And if that's what they're going for, I can understand that, and I do agree with it, because this is an excellently directed film. It is over the top at points, mainly, with the situation involving the house and, of course, some of the acting, but that adds to the charm of the film. The plot of the film is we're following a boy named Poindexter who goes by the nickname Fool because his sister is obsessed with tarot cards. His family lives in the ghetto. His mother is very, very sick. She has cancer. They don't specify what kind, it's just an internal kind. And because of this, they're behind on their rent and they're getting evicted. Well, their landlords are evicting them. Well, one, they're behind on their rent, but two, they're the last family in the building, and once they're evicted, they can demolish the building to build condominiums. Well, one of his sister's friends, Leroy, who is Ving Rhames' character, he talks to the fool and he's like, hey, you want to know how you can get money to pay your rent? We could steal. But it's not just from anyone. They're going to steal from the landlord, because apparently the landlord has a bunch of rare coins, and if they could sell them, they could pay their rent. So it's kind of funny. They're robbing their landlord to pay their landlord. A little bit of a funny dichotomy there. Well, they go to the house. Eventually, Leroy and Fool end up inside, and they find it's very weird. I mean, there's like switches to lock different doors. The front door is electrified. They find the dead body of one of their associates in there. And of course, they find out that the man and woman who live there are very weird. Weird is kind of understating it. They are crazy. And they have a daughter named Alice there who is so desensitized and so, I don't know if brainwashed would be the right term to use it, but it kind of fits. She's under the see, hear, and speak no evil rule. And you could tell that she really has not been around other people other than these people. And AJ does a great job portraying that type of character with her acting. Now, Fool also finds a boy named Roach who has no tongue and he lives in the walls, and he also finds that there are other boys down in the basement behind these wall things that don't really speak, and they've been abused a lot, both physically, which we don't see in from what we get a good idea of psychologically. And these are the people under the stairs of the title. And of course, you could guess that Fool's objective is to get out of there, try to find the coins if he can, but get out of there, and hopefully expose this hellish situation. Now, acting wise, I said there are bits and moments where it is over the top, more so from Everett McGill, who plays the man character. There's a couple moments in the film where he kind of seemed Jim Carrey-esque, even though this is before Jim Carrey became very popular, but mostly with his vocal inflections and how he moves, it kind of reminded me of that, but with how his character is, it fits. I just find it funny that his hunting outfit is S&M gear. It just makes me think, is this the Gimp from Pulp Fiction with a gun? And Wendy Robbie, she mostly is over the top at the end when she's when she's breaking down, I guess you could say. Rest of the actors are very reserved, except Brandon Adams, who plays Fool. There's a couple moments where he does yell a lot, but this is mostly towards the end. But most of the over-the-top nature comes from them, and of course all the actors that play the people under the stairs. But given how theirs is all physical performance, you could kind of excuse it. It's kind of like the over-the-top acting in the silent era, and then of course the early talkies before talkie acting had been fully established. So it's a little bit like that. A little bit. Like I said, AJ's acting as Alice, perfect. Funny thing is, though, even though the character is supposed to be 12, AJ was 17 at the time, which you could tell a little bit in how she looks. I mean, she does look bigger than a normal 12-year-old would be. But it just, I guess you'd say, with how she's built at the time, you don't really notice a lot of it. especially when standing next to Brandon Adams, which their back and forth is believable. I mean, there's not a romantic thing like you might assume would happen in a film like this. It's more like they become like friends, and at most they're like surrogate siblings for one another. Mostly in the last act when the character of Alice starts to snap out of it. Bill Cobb has a small role as the grandfather, which for what little he has to do, he's good to see him in there. Kelly Jo Minter plays Ruby, who is Fool's sister. She only has a couple scenes, but she's okay for what she has to do. Sean Wallen as Roach. He does good for what little he has to do. I mean, he doesn't really have a lot of dialogue, obviously, because his character has his tongue cut off, so it's mostly from his body language and his facial expressions, which he does a pretty good job of selling it. And apparently, this was his film debut, along with AJ's film debut, and Wendy Robbie, who played the woman. It was her film debut, at least in a theatrical sense. Although nothing groundbreaking, the makeup and special effects are done pretty well for the film. The makeup effects you mostly see in large amounts on the characters who are actually under the stairs. In a lesser extent, you see it on Roach, but for when like a character is injured and been smacked around a little bit, it works for the film. Special effects wise, probably the only really elaborate shots would probably be when the money flies out of the house at the end, and a little bit when the dog meets its demise. And of course, some minor stuff like jumping off. Well, actually, jumping off the roof would be more in the line of stunt work, but there's only like a couple major stunt things. Then, of course, there's the triple electrocution at one point in the film. That was executed pretty well. And the cinematography is well shot. But then again, with Wes Craven, the cinematography is usually one of the high points of the film, even if the film isn't as good as it should be. And this is something I find very interesting, but apparently Wes Craven, who also wrote the film in addition to directing it, was inspired to write this film after reading a real life news story about burglars breaking into a house, the authorities being called, and when they arrive, the burglars are gone, but they discover some locked doors with noises coming from behind them, and they found out that there were children behind these doors who were locked up by their parents and they never were allowed to go outside. I guess you could say it's just like Nightmare on Elm Street in that he got his inspiration from real life cases. He just tweaked it, to fit his imagination. I mean, obviously, you watch this movie like this is inspired by stuff that actually happened. Okay, like something like one of those things that you just read and you roll your eyes a little bit because you're like Hollywood's track record of saying based on true events, depending on the situation, usually isn't good. But this is more like inspired by something, with just like taking it and making it more extreme, more fantastic, if that's the right word to use. It's more fantasy based. Though it wouldn't surprise me if someone actually did keep a child in a house like this. It's just the rest of the stuff around it is like paranoid much. Then again, the characters kind of do justify it a little bit. It's like when they talking about burglars with the police later on in the movie. It's just a little interesting thing that this and Nightmare on Elm Street are both inspired by stuff you read in the newspaper. It's like that's a as a writer, get some inspiration, read the newspaper. You'll probably come up with a good idea based on something that actually happened. Now, the film was made for $6 million, and I have two different final gross tallies. Oh, okay, that's what it was going based on. 24 million I read in IMDb was domestic. Worldwide, it made $31 million, so it made back a good portion of its money. I don't know if you would call that a moderate success or a good success. I'd say that's at least a moderate hit. So, you can't call it a flop based on that, even when you factor in how much the theater chains keep. And of course, as I mentioned earlier, it got mixed reviews. 50 something that's mixed reviews, but there were critics who liked it. I don't know if I would go on to say if this is a cult hit or not, but it could go. It could qualify as a cult classic if you think about it, but I guess it would depend on your personal definition. Like with me, I say it could qualify as one. It's definitely a film I do want to get in my collection one of these days, and I know there's I believe that Shout Factory did a DVD Blu-ray of it, but I have to double check that. If so, that's the one I'm gonna try to get. I mean, even if it's not as good as some of their other ones, I don't have it in my collection, so. But, it's like with the Beetlejuice Special Edition one. It's better to get one if you don't have it. Get the one that's a half-hearted one instead of not having it in your collection to begin with. My rating for the film, I give it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. As I said, there are over the top moments, but it adds to the enjoyment and the charm of the film. It is, I don't know if I would call it campy at points, but I would understand if other people do, but it has a very over the top, I don't know, it has a very over the top charm to it, and that is where the enjoyment comes from. And it is a horror comedy, so I guess you could say weird stuff like that is to be expected. But I'd say it leans a little bit more in the comedy direction, but there are moments of genuine horror throughout the movie, mostly because a situation like this could theoretically happen.